Everybody has asked why Dairy Queens, and it's very easy. There's a lot of Dairy Queens in the district. There's one in almost every county. And when it's hot outside, it's nice to have the blizzard to cool things down. What I want to do today really is just talk a little about my background. Most of y'all know it. Talk about some of the things that are going on in Washington, D.C., and then take some questions if y'all have some. And it's crazy. I think I've been in Congress now for 19 months, a little over 19 months. When I was growing up in San Antonio, I never thought I'd run for office. And I wanted to be an engineer. I was interested in computer science with Texas A&M University. Got a degree in computer science. Then went into the CIA. I was an undercover officer, so I was the guy in the back alleys at 4 o'clock in the morning collecting intelligence on threats to our homeland. I did 2 years in D.C. and training, 2 years in India, 2 years in Pakistan, 2 years in New York City doing interagency work, and then about 1.5 years in Afghanistan where I managed all of our undercover operations. It was a fantastic job. But I also had a brief members of Congress in addition to collecting intelligence. And I learned very quickly, I was pretty shocked at the caliber of our elected officials. And my mama said either part of the problem or part of the solution. And so I decided to run for Congress. I left Afghanistan, moved to Helotes, Texas, and ran for Congress. And lost a runoff by 700 votes. Not a lot of votes. I'm thankful for that opportunity. Now, back then I wasn't. It was not fun losing. But it gave me the opportunity to get more involved in the private sector than what I had already to that point. I became a partner in a consulting firm. I helped companies grow in markets they'd never been in before. And then I also had the opportunity to start a cybersecurity company. And learning about starting a company from scratch was an important experience for me. When someone's starting a business, they shouldn't have to be worrying about a complicated tax code. They should be focused on how do you build a better widget, how do you provide a better service, how do you hire the best people. But instead, some of the problems that our entrepreneurs and small business owners are having is managing an arcane tax system. That's a problem. But that experience helped me make better decisions since I've been in Congress. And so in 2014, the opportunity came to run again. I took it, and this time we won. I've been I sit on the Homeland Security Committee. I chair a subcommittee on information technology, and I represent 29 of the most awesome counties in Texas. The district goes from San Antonio to El Paso down to Eagle Pass. 29 counties, 2 time zones. It takes 10.5 hours to drive from one corner to the other going 80 miles an hour, which is the speed limit in most of the districts. All right? My staff learned recently that's not the speed limit in all of Texas. It's a great part of the state, and I ran for office for 2 reasons: to be a leader on national security and the gold standard when it comes to constituent relations. And the reality is, a lot of what we do is helping people fight the bureaucracy, right? People that need it fought. And I don't do it alone. I have the honor of having my name on the sign and on the door, right? But it's a larger group of people that help us do these things. And I want to introduce a few. And before I do that, I just want to thank Dairy Queen. Y'all help me thanking them for letting us be here today. Make sure when we're done, buy some dip cones, some blizzards, belt busters, hunger busters, peanut butter parfait, all of it. So thank you for letting us be here. And also, our sheriff's office, thank you so much for being here. Yeah. They have a hard job, and they need people that support them. And so thank you for keeping us safe. Thank you for serving our communities. And the first person I want to start with on my team is Tyler Lowe. Tyler is one of our newest additions. He has been with the House Homeland Security Committee as their counsel, the legal counsel, for the last year and a half. An Aggie, we have a few on staff. He's an Aggie, did his law degree in San Antonio, and that experience that he brings is important because this district, I have 820 miles of the border, more border than anyone else. And the issues we deal with when it comes to Homeland Security are vast, and it's great having someone with Tyler's expertise. Jenny Tavares. Jenny is from Fort Stockton, did some schooling at Sul Ross, graduated from the University of Texas at Austin. We let a few of those slip in as well. And Jenny is one of our field reps that crisscrosses this district in getting feedback from constituents. Henry Rivera in the back. Henry's based in our San Antonio office. Henry is one of the guys that if you've had Social Security issues, Medicare issues, Henry's been the guy that has been, sir, thank you, sir. Yeah, I appreciate you being here. You want to say anything to the group?
Thank you all for being here.
Short and sweet. I love West Texas. Henry is one of the folks that are really battling the bureaucracy and is fighting on y'all's behalf. Stoney Burke, my chief of staff, not the famous cowboy. And he is from West Texas, grew up on a vegetable farm, an Aggie. I've known him since he was 14 years old. It's great having him kind of running the entire operations. And last but not least, John Arnold. As you can tell, and Longhorn, my stunt double, and he spent 9.5 years with the Army, serving his country, serving our country, and he had an intimate understanding of the VA, and it's great having him on staff, dealing with a lot of our VA, our veterans issues, and our issue with the military. One of the things I'm proud of is we've closed out 242 veterans cases last year alone. We're about to do the same number this year. These are folks that are having problems with their benefits. These are folks that are having problems with getting care. And under John's tutelage, we're the ones that are working to solve some of these problems. And here's the reality. Congress has funded the VA to the highest levels the VA has ever been funded. But we still have problems. We have problems with process, right? And we shouldn't. Because these are folks that put on the uniform and were willing to pay the ultimate sacrifice in order to keep us safe. I had the honor of serving alongside many of our men and women in uniform when I was in the CIA. I know the sacrifices they make. I know the sacrifices their family make. And we need to make sure that we're honoring their commitment even when they get out of the military. One thing I talk about at all these stops is the VA Choice Program. If you're a veteran and don't know about it, we need you to know about it. If you have a veteran in your family or you're friends with a veteran, I need you to tell them about it. It's a program that started about 1.5 years ago to help deal with the backlog in cases. If a veteran has an appointment with the VA that's more than 30 days away, they can go and see a local healthcare provider. If your appointment is more than 40 miles away, you can go and see a local healthcare provider if that local healthcare provider is part of the Choice Program. All right? Now, when this program started, of course, there was a lot of problems. It's far from being perfect. Early on, when a healthcare provider participated, they weren't getting paid by the VA on time. That was a problem that's prevented a lot of other healthcare providers from participating. TriWest is a company that administers this program. They went from 240 people to about 3,000 in order to help deal with the customer relations piece of this, to bring on more people into the system in order to provide care. This is an important program, and again, if you're a veteran and you have problems, let us know. Let John know. John has some forms they need you to fill out if we're able to look into your file and help you. Because the reality is this, our goal is to solve the problem for an individual. Because if that one person's having the problem, and guess what, thousands of people are having that problem, and if we learn how to solve that problem with that one person, then we're going to figure out how to solve it for everyone. Okay, and so this is something that we spend a lot of time working on. The reality is this. Washington, D.C., I'm going to tell y'all something that's probably going to shock you. Washington, D.C., is indeed a circus. But you can't believe everything you see on television and read in the newspaper, except for the local paper. Except for the local paper. Some things are getting done. How many of y'all have ever heard of the SGR fix? You don't count, y'all probably know about it. Not many people. We're actually pretty bad at naming stuff. We should have called this the increasing our seniors' access to good doctors while shaving $5 trillion off the national debt over 15 years. That's a mouthful, but that's what it did. It was the first time there was a change in Medicare to make sure our seniors are able to get access to the care they need. What was happening is, the way Medicare was reimbursing doctors, the formula was decreasing the amount of money that was being paid back every single year. And so doctors weren't participating in Medicare. We fixed that problem to ensure more doctors take Medicare so that our seniors have access to more doctors. Big deal. It's a very big deal. It also made sure we funded our community health clinics. We have a lot of community health clinics across this district. Their budget was being cut by 75%. Only Washington, D.C. thinks that's acceptable, and we were able to fix that. That happened this year. Not many people are talking about it. It's a big deal. How many of y'all have kids, grandkids, or great-grandkids? Pretty much everybody in this room. You should know about the ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act. This is an act that basically repealed No Child Left Behind. No Child Left Behind was something that both sides of the political aisle thought needed to go. There's no longer a one-size-fits-all solution to educating our kids in. Now, my fear is we're in this year of implementation where the states have to implement this new rule. I don't want to see the states implement a one-size-fits-all solution for the state, right? Because what you need here in Ozona is different than what you need in Chicago, is different than what you need in Iran, is different than what you need in San Diego. But you know who knows best on how to educate your kids? You do, your teachers do, your principals do, your superintendents do, all right? And now you'll have the power and authority to do that, right? And that's a big deal. Because here's the reality. We have to educate our kids for jobs that do not exist today. The technological change we're going to see in the next 20 years is going to make the last 20 years look insignificant. So we have to be prepared for that. For example, in Texas, 2015, 42,000 computing jobs went unfilled. Those are jobs that require some kind of coding experience or knowledge. The average salary for that job, $89,000. That's more than twice the average salary of a job in Texas. The problem is, Texas only produced 2,100 computer scientists to fill those 42,000 jobs. And what's even worse, we only had 5,000 high school kids take the AP computer science course. That's the course, if you take it, you get college credit. Of those 5,000 kids, only 24% were girls, less than 900 were Latinos or Latinas, and less than 120 were African American. That's a problem. That means only 17% of schools are actually providing this. Now with this passage of ESSA, we can have the power in order to change this. And guess what? The private sector is looking to help. We just finished a trip last week called Tech to Town, where we brought some tech officials out to rural areas that didn't have access to people like this. And this is why we have to make sure to educate our kids, because it's a national security issue. Now my heart was warmed last week. I was in Del Rio at a health fair. It's one of the poorest kids in the state. I asked 50 kids, 50 girls, from 7th grade to 2nd grade, what's your favorite subject? All but 3 said math and science. That's awesome. But we got to make sure they stay interested in this, right? Because it truly is a national security issue. That happened this year. This year we also lifted the ban on exporting crude. It was silly that we had it in the first place. But it happened this year. With my first week in office, I was talking about it, and people are like, don't talk about it, it's a sensitive subject. You know? This is something that is going to make sure our companies are the ones producing energy around the world. That it's our boys and girls that are working and have these good paying jobs that have supported our economy in Texas and in the United States. Right? And we have the other added benefit of putting Vladimir Putin in a box. Vladimir Putin, president of Russia, is not an ally. He is an adversary. And the best way to deal with Vladimir Putin is to sell energy to Eastern Europe, because the Eastern Europeans want to buy from us, not from him, because he used it as a tool to keep them down. But what we need is we need administration officials to go over to some of these Eastern European countries to help negotiate some of these agreements. Right? It's good for us. It's good for the rest of the world. That happened this year, and a lot of people aren't talking about it. Right? So there have been some successes. Now, one area that I did not expect to enjoy as much in Congress as I do is our oversight bill. Congress passes laws, the executive branch is supposed to enact them. The executive branch over the last 8 years has been getting too involved in rulemaking. EPA is one of them. I'm sure many of y'all know about the waters of the U.S. You know, I don't think this little depression out here is a navigable waterway. But according to the way the EPA wants to do it, they think it is. So what is that going to do? Additional regulation and red tape that's unnecessary. Going to drive up the cost of farming and ranching. It's going to drive up the cost of our food in our grocery stores. And who does that hurt? That hurts people who are on a fixed income. Right? Because if you're on a fixed income and your groceries go sky high, that's a problem. And it's also messing with our food supply. Having a secure food supply is a national security priority. And we need people that understand that. Now, when I went to Texas A&M, I was more the M than the A, right? But it's been great working with a lot of folks in this area to help educate me on these things and to fight on y'all's behalf. Because the farming and ranching community in this district are the lifeblood of this district, and we have to continue to protect it. Waters of the U.S., there's a stay by a federal court saying the EPA can't implement this new rule. This is going to go to the Supreme Court. The states have sued the executive branch, and it's probably going to the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court is tied, what happens? Whatever the last ruling was, stays in effect, which is good for us. Right? But this is why we need people in office that understand these issues and are not trying to put unnecessary regulations to get on your land and on your property. Our national debt is a national security issue. All of our senior national security advisors have said so. There's a couple ways you deal with that. Stop spending so much and increase the economy. We have a plan to change our tax code that outside groups, it's not me saying this, it's outside groups, independent groups saying that our plan, our tax plan, is going to grow the economy by 9%. That is a very big number. You do that, you raise all ships. You help everybody move up the economic ladder. You know, we should be making sure that Europeans should be talking about this thing called diversions, about moving companies here, because the environment in which to operate in the United States is so fruitful. That's going to help all of us. Right? The other thing you do is stop spending so much. Don't spend more money than you make. That's hard to do when you have someone in the executive branch that doesn't believe in that. But here's how we can fix it. I talk a lot about IT procurement. IT procurement is not a sexy topic. No one's going to hold a parade or a rally for IT procurement. But here's the reality. The federal government spends $80 billion on IT procurement. That's with a B. That's buying computers, software, things like that. 80% of that is on old and outdated systems. That's outrageous. That's a lot of money. That's y'all's money. All right? Now, why does that happen? There's a thing for anyone that's ever worked in the federal government. If you don't use it, you lose it. So there is zero incentive in the federal government to save money. 2 agencies transitioned to the cloud. All right, they took all their operations, put it into the cloud. They saved $2 billion. Are they going to be able to use that savings? No. Are they ever going to do it again? No. So that's why we have a bill called the Move It Act. That says, hey, if you realize savings from doing stuff by updating your IT systems, you should be able to put it in a fund and be able to have access to it for 3 years. Guess what? That gives you an incentive to save, and now you have ways to upgrade your information, your digital infrastructure. Because here's the reality. So let's use the Social Security Administration as an example. The Social Security Administration has information on every single American. And our seniors are being targeted by criminal organizations for fraud, right? To put in fraudulent claims with Social Security. We had a hearing a few months ago. 9 months prior to that, the Social Security Administration did a test of their system. There was thousands of problems. So we had the head of security, the head of digital security at our committee. My first question was, how many vulnerabilities, that's a technical term, the problems they had, how many vulnerabilities did y'all have? I don't know. Okay, second question. How many critical vulnerabilities did you have? Those are things that you're like, yikes, we need to solve today. I don't know. So then I said, what are you doing to protect our systems? And the response was many different things. So for those of y'all that are not technical, that is not a technical response, right? And that's where Congress comes in. Shine a light. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, right? GAO, General Accounting Office. Every year, it's the first hearing I was in when I was in Congress. Every year they do a thing called the High Risk Report. These are projects that are over $1 billion that something's wrong with. Okay, $1 billion is the cutoff. That seems a little high, but okay. We go in, I'm the junior guy, so I asked the question second to last. The head of GAO was there, and I said, sir, how long have you been with GAO? He said 40 years. That's a long time. In your 40-year career, have you ever heard of someone in the federal government getting fired for a cost overrun or a time overrun? You're smiling, I think you know where this is going. He strokes his beard, 14, 15 seconds. He goes, Congressman Hurd, I can't recall, but I'm sure somebody was put in hot water. Hot water? So I asked some more questions. Hearing's over. I'm leaving. I have my colleagues patting me on the back, Republicans and Democrats. Great questions, Will. Great questions, Will. And I'm like, why am I the first guy to ever ask a question about whether someone should get fired for a cost overrun or a time overrun? That's the kind of stuff that is so frustrating. But again, we need people that are willing to get down in the weeds to see why the process is messed up and fix that. And again, I can't put all that in 140 characters and put it out in a tweet, right? But we need people that are willing to roll up their sleeves and get things done. Now, I'm out here in order to listen to y'all as well. And so I want to stop there. And I tell the high school kids, I speak at as many high schools as I possibly can. I always tell the high school kids, I know what I know. I know what I don't know. But what I don't know, it's probably the largest of those three. So I'm taking pearls of wisdom. Right? And also, if y'all see the principal of the high school, tell him I said thank you. I had to throw out a pitch at a baseball game. And I had never thrown out a pitch at a baseball game. And I'm coming through Arizona. I call him up. I say, hey, can you get me on the mound and show me a few tips? And so he took me out on the high school mound, for about an hour. And I threw out the game, and I threw out the ball in an El Paso game, and it looked pretty good. So I was there with George P. Bush. I look better than George. So please tell him I said thanks. So I'm gonna stop there. And I want to take some questions. And I'm taking pearls of wisdom as well too.
Congressman, one thing I'd like to say, and I mentioned you, that she can go right into other places, but you mentioned the fact that here that you don't know everything, which I'm surprised at. I think you kind of do, but as far as agriculture, you made a statement real quick that you want to know, and you have been coming to it and asking a lot of good questions and hopefully learning, and I appreciate that your interest is in our interest in learning about agricultural problems in Texas also. Thank you.
No, thank you. Look, I've learned a lot about the fever tick, infectious weeds. You know, it really has been. That's been one of the fun parts of the job for me, is to understand these unique challenges that we have in the district and figure out ways how we can be helpful. Because it really is. That's why I'm here. I take that title, representative, seriously. Right? I don't just represent San Antonio. I represent all the counties. Right? I've been to Loving County twice. All right, that's the county seat, Mentone. 95 people in the entire county. I've been there. I've met 72 or 82 people there. And the last time I was there, I asked the county judge. I said, Judge, it's about 13 people I haven't met yet. He goes, heard, they don't want to be met. All right, like check. I'm gonna put a check there. Yes, ma'am.
You don't have time for all the questions that everybody here probably wants to ask that hasn't asked yet. And so there's so many things that need to be done, so many things that are broken, so many things that are just screwed up. How are you going to work? How is Congress going to get this done? I mean, these are common sense things that need to happen, but you've got people that have been there for 40 years, 35, 25 years. They won't work with you. They won't work with anybody. How are you going to get it done? I mean, seriously.
Well, it starts with, so I would say this. You're right. There's a lot out there, right? And you know, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? And so I've been surprised with a lot of the freshman class, folks that came in with me. These are people like Martha McSally from Arizona, who was the first female combat pilot in the U.S. Armed Services. We have John Katko from New York, who was a U.S. attorney. We have a pharmacist from Arkansas. We have people that have experience and other things that are trying to come in to solve these problems, right?
But they let you do your questions last.
Yeah, and that's fine. That's only part of it, right? But here's the reality. I've gotten 4 bills signed into law. I've had another 5 that have passed the House, that have companion legislation in the Senate. Several of those are probably going to get signed into law. That makes me actually the second most effective legislator in Washington, D.C. The only person that's ahead of me is the chairman of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. So you can't get things done. The first bill I got signed into law was a thing to help Border Patrol. Department of Homeland Security, in its infinite wisdom, was going to implement a new pay salary that our men and women in Border Patrol were going to lose between $700 and $1,000 per pay period. And they get paid every 2 weeks. So we had a very simple 1.5-page bill that stopped that from happening. Bipartisan support. Got signed into law. Right? Another one about duplication of IT systems within DHS. You start doing it, right? You start showing people how you get it done, and it starts happening. So you got to start somewhere. Now here's the other reality. Last year, we had 2.5 million interactions with our constituents. That's a very large number, because we have a system in place to hear y'all's concerns and to respond. I'm sure there's many people in this room that have sent me an email or a letter and you've gotten a response. There's probably many people in here that have been on our Teletone town halls where you've been able to ask a question, right? So I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing. That's why I come out here, is I hear a lot of good ideas and take them to Washington. And we can't give up, because I actually do believe our best days are ahead of us. I've crisscrossed this district dozens of times, and people are afraid and scared about the future of our country. They put a lot of money in and sending their kids to college, and they're worried are their kids going to be able to have a good paying job when they get out. They've toiled hard all their life, sunk money away in retirement, and they're concerned, is that going to be enough to keep me in my twilight? Some people are worried, if I go in the grocery store or the mall, is there going to be a terrorist attack? Right? Like I understand and appreciate those frustrations, those concerns. There's some of us that are actually working to solve those problems. Right? We're not moving nearly as fast as we can where you need us to. Right? But that's why we're constantly fighting that bureaucracy. So don't give up. Right? I'm not. No, I'm not. Look, listen. Mama Herd's youngest son has a very hard head. Right? And I'm not afraid of banging against the wall. Yes, ma'am.
And the younger folks that are coming on both sides of the aisle, are you seeing some bipartisans? Are they working together?
Absolutely.
Can they storm the castle and those that have been there 40 years, say, look, hold them accountable for what they're not doing?
My 9 bills that have gotten off the floor and some passed law, all bipartisan pieces of legislation. I worked, before lifting the ban on exporting crude, Henry Cuellar from Laredo, Democrat, and I worked on getting the Department of Commerce to approve a thing called swaps. That's swapping light and heavy crude with us in Mexico. Now, this is Henry and I working together, making this happen. So I have been surprised that the amount of actual bipartisanship that happens, right? And it's there, and that's going on. You don't see it enough, because guess what? It's not interesting on the news programs, right? The headlines will be like, Congress actually does its job, and you're not going to see that. But it's happening. It's happening. Yes, sir.
I got a pretty good question, but how in our United States have we ever come up with these sanctuary cities?
Yeah.
Where criminals can,
Yeah.
that's kind of like the hole in the wall game.
Sure. Sure.
Nobody wants to go on the hole in the wall.
Well,
that's what they call criminals.
Well, the reason we have that is because we're not enforcing our laws. All right. We need to enforce our laws, plain and simple. We're actually pretty good at interdiction, stopping people, but we need to actually enforce those laws. We also need to pass legislation, we need to pass budgets and appropriations, because that gives appropriators tools to deal with some of these agencies that aren't doing those kinds of things.
Why don't you cut their funds?
Well, you got to pass the budget
They're not
first.
doing their job.
Absolutely.
Cut their money, they'll start doing it.
Absolutely. And that's why we got to pass appropriations, all right? Because when we pass appropriations, we can do that. Do you remember ATF was going to ban a certain kind of ammunition? Because we funded the government, the appropriator was able to threaten to remove a lot of funding from ATF if they went through with that. And then guess what happened? They got in line, right? So that is a very important tool for us to have in Congress. And so when we don't pass budgets and we don't do appropriations, we take away the tools that we can use to try to corral it. Here, hit me again.
All right. I'm going to throw something at you no one wants to talk about.
Sure.
These Syrian refugees. Let's talk about them a little bit.
Sure.
One of them was passing through our community yesterday at 103 miles an hour. If I'm doing that out there, I'm going to jail. These guys, y'all give them a free walk, and I'm not saying you necessarily, I'm talking about the government. This guy's going 103 miles an hour, gets stopped. He's got a rental car. He's got a driver's license out of California. He's from California. The patrolman asked him, where are you traveling from and to? And he's traveling from Houston going back to California. Rented the car out of Florida. And when he asked him, well, because he doesn't know the guy, he just got his driver's license. He asked him, what's your job? I don't have a job. I'm a Syrian refugee and the government pays me. I get up and go to work every day, have been doing it for a long time. pay a lot of stuff into the government. And again, I'm lumping you in with these guys, I'm not saying y'all one of them. But y'all are wasting money up there faster than we can throw it in there. And then y'all come and want more. And I'm not saying Congressman Hurd is good at that. I think they're on the same side we're talking about. But it's real frustrating.
Well, first off, I want you to keep more of your money and not send out to Washington D.C. So that's number one. We do that, we solve many of these problems. I don't
We've got
know.
people in this community
Absolutely.
that could use that money.
Absolutely.
That could help our own citizens. Not that
Absolutely.
I don't want to be compassionate with other people, but you know, again, I get my news and I hear certain stuff, and I'm sure it has a slant.
Yeah, it does.
These guys, in my opinion, could be planning to cut my head off next week because I don't know what they're going to do, and neither do you, because they probably weren't vetted like they were supposed to be. And I know the other side is ready to turn another 200,000 loose on us.
So, a lot of questions.
And I know there's no real answer.
But it's an important issue because I spend a lot of time on it. The program where the federal government is paying for Syrians, I don't know of that. And so I would like to know the officer that was involved in this to follow up. So we'll figure out Tyler to follow up with you on that because specifics matter, and to be able to get down to the bottom of things is important. There's a bigger issue than Syrian refugees. An actual refugee is someone who's been in a refugee camp overseas for about 2 years. And there has been vetting, right? UN, the Department of Homeland Security, all that. But asylum seeker is someone that can just show up and say, hey, I'm seeking asylum from political persecution here and there. And those people are treated way differently, and the level of vetting is not happening. But there's even an easier way. For someone who's interested in doing us harm, get a European passport and 5 years. I sat on a task force that looked at the issue of Americans going into Iraq and Syria to fight with ISIS to come back. One of the things that we found, our European allies were only checking 1 out of every 3 travel document when people crisscross their country. That's a terrible number. Our European allies were not checking known travelers against terrorist watch lists. These are people that are ultimately going through what's called a last point of departure. That's an airport where you can fly from overseas to the United States. That's a problem. We identified this on those task force, and we've actually passed legislation to deal with this issue, to tighten that up. Because if I want to do harm to the U.S., I'm going to get a stolen European passport, I'm going to get on a plane, and I'm going to fly through one of our airports. Right? So that's why this problem starts overseas. Number one, with a group like ISIS, take the fight to their doorstep. This administration has waited way too long to do that. We need to increase the amount of human intelligence that's coming out of places like Iraq, Syria, and Libya. Right? And we also need to deal with the ideology of Islamic extremism. What makes ISIS so dangerous is their ability to inspire people even if they're 6,000 miles away. When I was chasing Al-Qaeda in Pakistan and Afghanistan, they would do something called a night letter. They would write a letter and leave it on somebody's doorstep, right? You can hit a couple hundred people a day doing that. But ISIS is doing 4 social media campaigns a day, translating it into 49 languages and dialects, and hitting hundreds of thousands of people. And we have to counter that. And guess what? We're not. We had to pass a piece of legislation to tell DHS and say, hey, there were some young men that went to fight with ISIS in Iraq and Syria, left, and made public pronouncements saying, these guys are terrible, they're bad Muslims, they're hurting innocent people. Hey, that's pretty good messaging. We should use that in the counter messaging. We weren't. And then we get pushback when we pass this legislation saying, do this. It's like the old Scare Straight program. Right? But we also need, it's not just government alone. The State Department's not going to be able to do this with their Facebook page by themselves. We got to be working with philanthropic organizations, and we have to be working with our Arab partners overseas, right? In order to counter this ideology. Because we can stop all of ISIS, but if we don't stop the ideology, the next group is going to pop up. Al-Shabaab, Jamaat Islamiyah. There's so many of these other groups. And we're fighting terrorism. And we got to be able to fight multiple people at multiple times. So this is a complicated issue. And we need people in Washington, D.C. that understand this, right? And that are willing to do things. And you stop them over there before they get here, guess what? You're not going to have these problems, all right? If we would have stopped Bashar al-Assad when he's a guy that used chemical weapons on his own people. He's the one that created the refugee problem. And then the Russians are going to come in, and we're going to let the Russians do whatever they want? That's insane. The only reasons Russians came into Syria is they went an air base in southern Syria so that they could project power in the Mediterranean. The only reason they went into Ukraine is they wanted to project power in the North Atlantic. They've already messed up international shipping routes. The Russians are not our friends, they are our adversaries. Right? So all this stuff is connected. And it comes back here to someone getting stopped driving 103 miles an hour. I'm gonna end with this, and we'll take a few questions. Somebody has some private questions before we have to get on down the road.